Hey guys, welcome back. We wanted to start by thanking everyone in the community for following us and liking and subscribing. Ralph and I really appreciate it. But now we're going to take you back to January 2020, where it all started. Episode 1 of the One Up Weekly, pulled from the archives, and here for you today. All of the information still very relevant, and we hope you enjoy it. Let's do this.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is the very first episode of the One Up Weekly. And I am Ralph, and this is my co-host, Justin, who's over there, I think. I don't know, one of these boxes. So, Justin, what's going on, man?
Yeah, not much. It's been a crazy couple weeks for us. We're going to get right into it and talk about the history of arcade and, the home arcade world. But since it's our first episode, right? This is the official first episode of the One Up Weekly. We wanted to catch everybody up on kind of like the history of arcades in general and home arcades, because as we go through these episodes, maybe when we get to episode 10 or 50 in a year or something like that, we'd like to point back to this episode and say, if someone else enters new into the home arcade world and they're like, where do I get started? Well, this would be a pretty good episode to talk about. But don't worry, we're going to do some interaction as well. How's it sound, Ralph?
That sounds perfect. I did want to say one thing though. I don't want the name of the actual show to make you believe that it's only about Arcade One Up. It's just that I liked One Up, and Justin and I both like that, so We're calling it the One Up Weekly. So this is going to cover everything. We may have episodes where we talk about console gaming only. So just keep that in mind that even though the show is themed on arcades, we're going to do a lot of other things too. So cool. Yep. All right, well, we'll get started. So, one of the things that if you look back a little bit in the history, we all came from a place where we loved arcades, right? And if you look at kind of the timelines of when they were popular, it pulls on our nostalgic heartstrings. And we're all probably, most of the viewers of the show are usually around like 30, maybe late 20s. 30s and late or mid or early to mid 40s is really the range of the show, according to at least YouTube analytics, right? But we loved the camaraderie of the arcades. We loved going to the arcades. But the one thing that would always sort of like pain you is like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have one of these in my house. Like we all wished we had one. And if we watched shows in that time period, Silver Spoons, Saved by the Bell, they all had backdrops with games. Some even had games in their houses. So we always wanted to have a game in our house, right? But it was unattainable, guys. The cost of those systems was too much to be able to put one in your house. It just wasn't going to happen. So, if we look...
Yeah. So, Ralph, I'm going to interrupt you, throw you off your game. So what was the first arcade game that you remember playing?
So actually, funny you should ask that, Justin. So there was a Chinese restaurant that was in the town I grew up in, and they had a Galaga cocktail cabinet sort of in the area where you were before you got seated. And I really didn't like going to that restaurant because I didn't like the Chinese food, but I loved playing Galaga. So Galaga would have been the first game I played, and it wasn't in an arcade. It was literally in the waiting room of like a Chinese restaurant. How about you?
Yeah, it was a cocktail cabinet of Pac-Man, somewhere around 1984. It was at a pizza parlor, a pizza place. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was something like McGrady's or something like that. It had like theater screens and stuff, different rooms where you could watch like cartoons, but it also had a Pac-Man, and it was amazing. My sister played it, and I have those memories.
That's awesome. So, I mean, if you look at it, right, let's look a little bit. So right now I'm actually looking at a graph that's the history of gaming. And in this graph, you've got, kind of how much revenue is generated by these particular, points in time as gaming was evolving. And then the bottom is got sort of timelines. And if you look, like arcade gaming was really, really hot in the 80s, right? You look, it started, with Pong, which was 1972, and it gradually increased. And then by like 1977, it was pretty popular. It dipped a bit. And then 1980, it just skyrocketed, 80, 81, 82. And that would have been, you think about it, right? We're going to get into this a little bit more, but what are the games that Arcade 1-Up came out with first? It was like pulling on the heartstrings of that time period, pretty much. So it's kind of cool. But then as you go down the timeline, you see arcade gaming getting less popular because consoles started to emerge, right? And this was like before anyone was playing any kind of games on their cell phone or anything like that, but console gaming started to sort of take hold. So if you look at it, really arcades started to sort of die out when we were in the arcades playing games like Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat and all that. Like, even though we believed arcades were really hot, it was at a peak, but that peak wasn't even close to the amount of revenue that arcade gaming was bringing in the 80s. So it was actually on a decline. And then you see it like sort of rapidly go away toward the 2000 era where,
once it hits the 2000, it's flatlines.
Well, and it's funny, right, Justin, because the 2000s is right when you start getting some mobile games. And so consoles are evolving and mobile games are beginning. And it really does start to, kind of decline. The one interesting thing in here is handhelds kind of never really reached it. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of money being made from handheld devices. But it's interesting because in this graph, console does include Nintendo Switch. They don't actually consider Nintendo Switch a handheld here because obviously if they did, you'd see handhelds be a huge piece. So they actually throw Nintendo Switch into console, even though you could argue it's really a handheld and it's probably used more as a handheld than a console. But anyways,
that's right.
What'd you think about this, Justin? I mean, anything that you'd kind of debate in this or?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking. I just remembered when I first played the original Nintendo back in I think it was about 86, 87. My uncle came over and I was at my cousin's house and he handed me a $5 bill. He was just like, "Hey, I'm leaving and I didn't get time to spend with you, so here's $5. Don't spend it all in one place," he said. And then I remember saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna take it to the arcade. I'm gonna go and play it at the arcade." And we're like, no. And then my cousin was like, "You don't need to because we have one downstairs."
Yeah,
He was trying to explain to me the NES that he had, and the concept of not having to put quarters in something was
it's
like crazy to me, right?
So we're gonna, Justin, I'm gonna like take you we're gonna like hop into the DeLorean right now. We're gonna go a little bit into the future, right? We're gonna go into, we're gonna go from this 80s, 90s period and we're gonna rapidly kind of move forward. But one of the things, the reason why, like while all of this is going on, it wouldn't have been affordable for you to put an arcade in your house, right? For the majority of everyone. But then, there was a period where MAME started. So people started doing emulation. So that was kind of like step one into bringing it into the house. But they, and some that had the money or had the know-how could build cabinets and stuff like that. But I want you guys to understand, like DIY arcades, arcades, not DIY arcades, the company, but building arcades yourself have been around for a while, except then they started doing these, like they were more diagrams, right? It was, here's a design and you can build it if you have the woodworking skills. But then these companies started popping up that would actually build they'd build you kits that they'd flat pack them and send them to your house so you can build a cabinet. Now, still, this isn't for everyone either because you have to build it. You have to set up your PC or whatever it was. At the time, it would have been a PC. Pies weren't around then. And, so there was a lot of work involved. And if you didn't know anything about emulation or anything, you weren't going to just slap this together and start going. So the one I'm showing you in the example is Rec Room Masters. There's many of them. I'll show you another one, which is Extension Arcade. So Extension Arcade actually takes it a step further than someone like a Rec Room Masters and makes it really easy. They give you the cabinet, you build it, and it has a drop-in control panel. So the control panel can be wired for a Raspberry Pi or even like a JAMA harness if you're going to put a JAMA board on it. So it's actually kind of cool. They actually make it the most simple if I were to kind of compare a bunch of these together. But, the one thing that's interesting here too is there's still a skill level to get into it, right? It wasn't like everyone was rushing out to buy these. I think these companies have done fairly well, but it wasn't like what we're seeing now with the advent of some of these other things like Arcade 1-Up. And Arcade 1-Up was just the first one to kind of make it feasible, even though there were other companies before them that we could go into. But for this conversation, we're just going to kind of roll into the current offerings, like what's out there and, where is it headed? Because I think that's really interesting.
Right. So let me ask you, during that time, what would be like the average price for some of those cabinets? I mean, did they get to the 300 price? I don't think so, right?
Oh yeah, for the DIY kits, no. I mean, they were really expensive at the time. So the ones I'm showing you are current ones, but the ones you would have bought back then, If you kind of rewind time a little bit, they would have been pretty expensive. They probably would have been in $1,000, $1,200. But if you're talking about something that's $1,000, $1,200 versus buying a complete cabinet for $5,000, people weren't buying arcade cabinets for $5,000 to $10,000, because some of these arcade owners, they were buying them for $5,000, $10,000. So you think about that wasn't going to be feasible for someone in their house. Pinball, super expensive too. So the whole point of this.
Well,
Sorry,
it makes me think like what kind of was happening is throughout the years, right? The gaming industry as a whole has been continuing to climb, as you showed in the chart.
Yeah.
Overall, billions of revenue continues to climb each year. But then we have computing power continues to increase, and the cost to achieve it decreases, right? So even now we can pick up a Raspberry Pi, which is a pretty decent small computer that can run a lot of these arcade games for $35. That's something you couldn't do, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, just if you're going to mass produce some type of embedded device, around the time the Fire Stick came out, I remember that being a huge thing because, here's a company, Google or Amazon, making millions of these, and they could get that chipset to be super small. And the rest of the world, some people were actually modding them and throwing, arcade games on it, and Nintendo, Super Nintendo emulators, because it could run it and you could run to the store and pick them up. So it kind of makes sense that, a company would come along and see all of this. And
and it's been attempted. It's been attempted a bunch of times. There was I can't remember the name of it. I think it was like a Namco cabinet. It had a really small, it was like a 13-inch CRT in it. So it's been attempted. It's just no one. I do think you bring up a good point though. As the compute power got less and less and less, you didn't have to put a PC in it. You didn't have to make a custom board, really. You could pull off the shelf almost components and be able to run, an operating environment that could support these games. So that did over time make this way more feasible. So Justin, I think we're gonna fast forward to what's happening now, right? Like what did we walk into last year? Because really, Arcade 1UP would have done their CES announcements. So after the Street Fighter cabinet came out, it would have been around October of 2018 that their first unit would have shipped. So we're gonna show you something really quick here. So oh shoot, I don't even have the clip ready. All right, we're gonna talk through it. Sorry, I thought I had the clip ready there. So you think about it, right? Arcade 1UP goes to market, and they bring out all these other cabinets. So they're bringing out all these cabinets that would have existed. You had Galaga, you had Centipede, you had Pac-Man. All games that really pulled on our heartstrings at the time. Now, but the thing is, they did this and they were testing the market, right? I believe they were testing, is this feasible? Because now look at them, they're going and they're constantly updating what they've put out there, right? They're putting marquees on, they're putting better controls on it. They started to make cabinets that actually have the shapes of the original cabinets. So they listened to their audience, but I don't think they would have gotten to that point if the first wave wasn't a big hit. The first wave hit and they were like, holy crap. I think they were like, think about it, guys, just for a second. This company sold Hatchimals. They sold Hatchimals. Their website would have showcased the Hatchimal. So to think, in the beginning, they really didn't know what they were doing probably. But when you bring on a staff of people that understands what's going on and they start evolving the product, it's like, wow, you start seeing what they can do. So I think they started the trend, and they got it right. They got the price point right. Now, all of a sudden, you could have one in your house. So that's really exciting. But no one was applying any pressure to them. They kind of were the standalone, at-home arcade company. Outside of the DIY people that had always been there, but now you made it so that anyone, literally anyone, could have a Pac-Man in their house, or anyone could have a Galaga in their house. So, that's kind of a big turning point, don't you think, Justin? That was a key moment for them that people actually wanted this.
That's right. Well, they went out of the gate wide, right? So they went to, they were being shipped in Walmart was their primary retailer, right? So they're going to be selling several of these models directly on Walmart.com or in store. And so that's when, a lot of us start to hear about that last year, 2018. And then there were some issues, right? There was some quality issues. Yeah. They didn't get everything right. The price was right. People were wanting them for cheaper, but you have to admit a lot of people bought the first wave cabinets for $300.
Yeah.
And as we go throughout the years, a lot of people have bought the newer cabinets for even more than $300. I
Yeah.
mean, I bought the Star Wars cabinet for the full $499 price because it was so unique. And they have dropped down in prices, and there's various reasons for that. But some of the mistakes they made in the beginning, of course, there was the deck protector issue.
Yeah,
They
deck
it
protector gate.
required it. Yeah, that's right. So, the graphics would rub off just from the oils in your hands, and they had said that they'd done some things to prevent that. They even set up a rig at their manufacturing that would just kind of, when you go to IKEA, they have those like machines that are like testing.
Yeah, opening and closing drawers and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. The guy that we talked to, who was there in the beginning, he mentioned that that's what they did. And so they had this machine that would just sit there and rub onto the artwork, and they ran it thousands of times, and it didn't have any issues. But they didn't think, what about the oils?
Yeah, what about the oils in your skin? Yep.
Yeah, so you add that to it, and the thing rubs off right away. But they fixed that, and a lot of people don't even know that they did upgrade the graphics so that if your palms were resting on it, you probably wouldn't have any issues. But they went ahead and then had the deck protectors on there anyway, which I think is great anyway,
Yeah.
because the deck protector kind of gives it that little extra shine. I personally think it looks better with a deck protector. And going forth, they just left it on there. It's probably not too expensive to just manufacture it that way. I think they made a lot more mistakes that a lot of people aren't talking about. A lot of people aren't talking about those first wave monitors having really bad viewing angles.
Yep.
They got the resolution incorrect. So there was shimmering. If you look in the background of Street Fighter 2, as you move around, you'll see these little kind of dancing lines. If you've not experienced that, maybe you don't notice it.
Well,
You
Justin,
kinda have to look for it.
the audio issues too. So if you wanted it to be
Oh,
in
right.
stereo on, I can't remember which. It's not Champion Edition. I think it's
It's the first one.
yeah. You'd actually be, if your character, anything that was on the opposite channel wouldn't actually, you wouldn't actually hear it. So there was
Right.
definitely
It's so
its fair.
it's so that one was so messed up because the fix was super easy. Like when you initiate the emulator, the Moo emulator that they use, there's a flag to say run this game mono. And it's like
they
literally
could have
just
done
forgot to
that.
add like one line in it, and then it would make it where the left speaker will come out to the right speaker. But they fixed that. And then there was another issue with the Rampage cabinet, right?
Yep.
And they actually had to like swap emulators on that one, switch to a different ROM because I think it was like level 32, it would just crash.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
that
now,
wasn't. No, well, yeah, it wasn't Rampage. It wasn't Rampage the game. It was on Gauntlet,
yeah,
but it was the
it
same
was on
board.
Gauntlet.
Yeah, same board.
Right. So they had a couple issues, but let's list through those, right? Those issues. And with Wave 2 and Wave 3, and now I think what we're calling like a Wave 4, Gen 4, they've fixed every single one of those things. And
Yeah.
a couple times, in fact. So, for example, the Gen 3 models have a USB port on the actual PCB and a switch that's specifically designed to be able to update the PCB firmware in case they make a mistake with, like, say, Street Fighter
Yep.
or Gauntlet. Those mistakes can be patched. Then they took it further with the latest ones that the NBA Jam cabinet and the Sega cabinet are Wi-Fi connected, so
Yeah.
that you don't even need the USB. They can just patch it over the air.
Which is awesome. I think that's a much needed thing. I do think it's actually one of the things we did see at CES was this idea that they're going to re-release some of the older cabinets. One of them being Street Fighter. So I'm hoping, and we did ask some of those questions, but those. So just so you guys know, sometimes things at CES end up being concepts. They're actually not for sale. They may not even see the light of day sometimes, but they're trying to, because it really, CES is a place for potential buyers to come and evaluate what your company does. And so those Wave 1 sort of rehashes or retooling, some of them may come out, some of them may not, but I think people were so into Street Fighter when it initially came out that I wouldn't be surprised if they re-released it. I just hope when they do, they actually do it with all of the newer technology in it, like scan lines, like fixing the audio, making sure the monitor is 4:3, correct aspect ratio. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. But like for all intents and purposes, Arcade 1UP was competing with themselves, right? That's all they had to compete with. There wasn't anybody else in the market. So then, insert we're going to fast forward a little bit more. So now we're
Mm-hmm.
fast forwarded to E3 2019. So really, Arcade 1-Up stood alone all the way up until E3 2019 as far as this at-home arcade market goes. And that's when At Games decided to announce this whole idea around this Legends Ultimate arcade cabinet, which is going to be the first connected at-home arcade. Why this was so interesting was that, to date, Arcade 1-Up was like, well, we're going to pull on the nostalgic heartstrings of people's favorite games. And we're going to say, here's a cabinet. It's got your favorite artwork and it's your favorite game you remember from your childhood. Where At Games was just like, no, we're going to put this thing in and we're going to give you access to a whole lot more, this whole external world where, we're selling you one cabinet, but our cabinet is not. We're not going to be selling you another one a couple months ago or a couple months from now because we just sold you a platform that we're going to build on. So it's almost like you could almost think of the At Games Legends Ultimate as selling you a gaming console. I sold you a gaming console that's wrapped around a cabinet. I mean, that's really what it is.
So a lot of people ask, and At Games has its own issues, right? It has one really, really big issue.
Yeah. I mean, it has the historical issue as one. Is that the one you're going to talk about? The biggest one is the history.
No. I don't know what you're talking about. What I'm saying.
No, the history of the company is a big one. They had to get over that.
Okay,
that's the biggest
I'll give you
issue.
that.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to amplify that one. No.
Well, I'm not trying to amplify it, but I'm just saying it's a valid one.
Let me say it this way: At Games has a challenge. Their challenge is availability. Like, people are going crazy for the At Games Legend Ultimate, and they would be selling a lot more if they were available.
And I didn't want, Justin, I didn't mean to be negative there. It's just that part of the story is that their first initial, as they entered the market, everyone had these preconceived notions of At Games. So it's almost like they've gotten over that hump, thankfully, because they put out a pretty good product, right? That people actually want.
It's unfortunate. Like, I'm good friends with Bob from RetroRGB, and I chatted with him while I was up in New York.
Hold on. This is when Justin isn't with me. He hangs out with more high-profile YouTubers. Sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
Anyway, no, I told him this idea that I had because the problem with At Games, they made a mistake on one of their Sega consoles. Right? They number of years ago they released a Sega emulation console. It kind of left a scar on their face because the emulation wasn't that great. And that story, that's what people are remembering is At Games equals bad emulation for Sega. But then a couple of years later, they released a new version that fixed all those issues, and no one said anything. No one was like, hey, actually, their new one's really awesome. And then Sega announces that they are making their own first-party official Sega Mini, right? And then people found out At Games was behind it, and they were like, no, it can't be At Games, because look at how bad they did the Sega, and they're talking about the older version of the Sega console, not the newer one that's actually a lot better. And so, in the end, At Games was not behind the Sega Classic, which was done by M2, which, by the way, has audio issues. There's delay in the audio. So M2 kind of messed it up, And so I've always wondered what it would be like if At Games actually did do the first-party Sega Mini. Maybe they wouldn't have messed up. Because a lot of people are saying their newer Sega, not to confuse everyone, but I think it's their 2018-2019 model of the At Games Sega console has really good emulation. Doesn't have any audio issues, and it takes actual cartridges. So it can play kart games, and it emulates. It comes with a whole bunch of games on it. But that same company gave us an arcade cabinet as well, and it's doing really well.
No, I agree, man. It is. It actually is doing really well, and like you said, the biggest issue is actually getting access to it. So for those of you just joining, I just want to know what we're doing here is we're actually building it up to where we are today, right? So we're doing a little bit of a history lesson since this is officially episode 1. But when we get to about the little past the 30-minute mark, we're going to open it up and get your go inside the chat and see what you guys are doing and what you guys think about everything so far. So the last thing here, we look at games. The funny thing is, I didn't mention this, is that if you're in the video clip that I'm playing here, I play David at Street Fighter, and he was talking this big game. And as you guys know, he probably looks really familiar to everyone because he actually works for Arcade 1-Up now.
Yeah,
but
why don't you explain that? So he worked for Chiscom, right?
Yeah, this might be a little hard to explain, but I'm going to try. So Chiscom is a marketing firm. Arcade 1-Up, actually, they outsourced their marketing to Chiscom originally, and David worked for Chiscom. So David actually didn't work directly for Arcade 1-Up, but in the old videos, you'd see David on the floor at conventions and stuff because he was there representing Arcade 1-Up on behalf of Chiscom. So anyway, so he worked there for a while, and then he left Chiscom. Or actually, no, sorry, he didn't leave Chiscom. Chiscom no longer was working with... I have it right. Hold on.
There you go.
Yeah, Chiscom.
You got it.
Yeah, Chiscom. So Chiscom. Whatever happened to the Arcade 1-Up Chiscom relationship, I have absolutely no idea. I have no insight into that. And if someone's saying they know, unless they actually witnessed it, they probably don't. But whatever happened, somehow ties were severed there. So Chiscom decided to actually work with AtGames. So they got a contract with AtGames. That's when David started to work on that project, and he was no longer associated with Arcade 1-Up, obviously, because Chiscom wasn't working with Arcade 1-Up. This was...
And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so right here in this video, he's on behalf of Chiscom, but he's supporting the AtGames product, which was a contract that Chiscom had. So anyways, long story short, David was talking some smack, said he was really good at Street Fighter. And so if you watch the CES content that we posted on YouTube, we did do a rematch, although it wasn't Street Fighter 4, and I did beat him. We were 1-1 here, but David was talking like he had all this training and stuff, and I don't know about that. I love David. He's a great guy, but I don't know about all this training, because I'm kind of an okay Street Fighter player. I wouldn't put myself in some upper echelon. But yeah, so anyway, whatever. Long story short, David and I had the rematch finally, but we'll do that We'll do that next time too. So that kind of brings us to current times, right? We've got the AtGames out there, but keep in mind, guys, AtGames has a very, very small user base right now. So if you try to look at who the king right now would be Arcade 1-Up, and then you have AtGames, who maybe, we're speculating here, maybe has 2,000 users. That's probably a fair to say.
Yeah. We're guessing that based on the size of their groups comparatively to Arcade 1-Up. So that's what we think. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know for sure, but we're speculating. Let's just say it's 2,000. But the good thing is they've built a platform that's actually good. So they probably, when they finally do have availability of product, they will start to push on Arcade 1-Up. But I think, we don't know the real numbers because they're not a public company, but I would think Arcade 1-Up has a lot of units out in the field right now. So there is a huge user base of Arcade 1-Up fans out there. So that, to say that these two are kind of, that AtGames is putting a lot of pressure on Arcade 1-Up, I would say right now maybe not, but I'm sure they're looking at them going, hey, we need to figure out how to incorporate connected features because people are kind of digging the idea of having a connected arcade. So I'm sure you're going to start to see, Arcade 1-Up eventually start to weave in more of that. We see it in the NBA Jam cabinet. But then, at CES, we started seeing all these other things pop up, and one of them happened to be this company called II Arcade. Actually, you know what?
Offering in 2020. So
actually, you know what? Let's go here first, because really the timeline is actually messed up because it wasn't II Arcade first. It was Toy Shark. So Toy Shock hit the market. They weren't covering arcades, but they were covering pinball. So we get this introduction of a company called Toy Shock. They marketed the thing completely to kids, but you could argue that like Arcade 1-Up being a toy company could have kind of had that same angle, but all their marketing pictures were mostly adults in the pictures, not kids, although they had some. So this company comes in, they're like pushing the limits on, hey, we're going to bring the first virtual pinball to market. So that was kind of interesting to see them do that. So now we have another company in there. So now you have Arcade 1-Up, you got AtGames, you got Toy Shock, and then now there's another one that emerges. Captain Arcade, and it's like, where do
offering
they
in
stand?
2020.
To
So
me, they don't even have a product really. I mean, they have this, but it's not being sold. So to me, this is like super early stages, and I laugh because I was joking about this. You guys know I have fun with things, so it's just like I was kind of thinking, like, how did this emerge? Was the owner of the company's wife like, hon, we were doing that cabinet, that countertop remodel, and maybe you could use some of the old marble to, like, design the arcade, drill a couple holes, it'd look great. So it's just kind of weird, the design. And the funny thing is that, we gave them that feedback at CES, like, this thing doesn't look good. And honestly, it only has one licensed game right now. So I'm not trying to talk smack, but they're really not someone that's putting a lot of pressure into the marketplace right now, because number one, their product's not for sale yet, and they only have one licensed game, at least as of, a couple weeks ago at CES. So there's not a lot here right now, but the good is that the sound of it is really good. It has this 80-watt sound system that sounds really good. So, I mean, they got the sound right, their controls are good, but, and the screen is, this is actually the 17. They haven't decided on 17 or 19. But there's still a lot to be desired, wouldn't you say, Justin? I mean, you and I both spent a decent amount of time on this, so there's still a lot that they have to prove.
They want to try to take arcade.
Right, so let's back up for a second. II Arcade, they're a new entry into the home arcade,
there was a first-person shooter that I tried where, like, one was sort of like you're looking around with one stick and the other one you're moving, and it actually worked pretty good. I was surprised about that.
That has been selling products for a long time.
Speaking of the game, one of the things that's kind of neat is if you pick a
Walmart,
game.
Best
what they
Buy,
do is they've already
Walgreens,
predetermined
they
what
have
buttons
licensed
need to be
games.
They've
They've
sold
sold
layouts, so
tens of thousands of products,
it's always
maybe
going to be mapped
100,000.
that
I don't
way.
know.
Now, the only licensed
for many
title
years,
that I'm allowed to talk about right now
Atari,
is Double Dragon. So they do have Double
Atari
Dragon
flashback
licensed.
units,
and it plays fairly well. And one of the things I wanted to noticed when I played with it was the buttons and the joystick.
Oh, shoot. You know what? The video audio is playing. That's my bad. Sorry, guys. That's my bad. That was my fault. Sorry about that, guys. Okay.
Seriously. Okay, so when you take a look at II Arcade and you compare it to someone like At Games, there's no competition. At Games is going to win. At Games has been around for a very long time. They've produced a lot of products in the past. They have business relationships already with the retailers. II Arcade probably can't even get a phone call with Walmart, to be completely honest. And so I'm not sure which retailer they're going to be able to make a connection with.
Yeah. By the way, Justin, people think I did that on purpose and played my voice over yours.
Of course you did.
Which I would... Come on. Do you think I'd really do that? Would I really do that? Maybe.
Anyway, so II Arcade, I would love for them to succeed. I have no problem with there being another competitor. I think they don't know what they're doing, to be honest. They're probably watching this and want to kill me, but whatever. Because they got the license for Double Dragon, but they told us they specifically didn't want to do a Double Dragon cabinet. And it's kind of like, why would you rule that out? Like, what if that's how you can get a phone call with Walmart? Be like, we're going to do a Double Dragon cabinet. But they want to do this thing where it looks like marble, and it has really loud speakers, because you know how awesome Double Dragon music is. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't really make sense, to be honest.
Yeah. No, it was weird.
When I think of Double Dragon, I think of the amazing beats that game has, right? It's just, I don't know, maybe they're going to get licensed for more games. And they did show us some modern games running on that hardware, and that was really, really cool.
But they won't let us, we couldn't talk about those, though. That's the thing. They did, so it was like they had this idea, I mean, we can kind of talk about it, right? I mean, so they had this idea that, wouldn't it be cool if you took, like, maybe phone-based games, like let's say there was like cool Android side scrollers and things like that, and port them to this device to be able to play those in like a side scrolling game on a screen like this, but something that's modern. So it wouldn't be like games that we've played from a retro perspective. They would actually be modern games that they would port to the device. And honestly, the game they showed, which I can't remember the name now, Justin, was like it was almost like a Castlevania clone, like a modern Castlevania clone. I actually had fun playing it.
Yeah, it was really cool, fun to play.
But I don't know that but put it this way, I had fun playing it, but would I play that and go, I gotta buy this arcade? I wouldn't. It wouldn't have made me buy this because number one, there's a million ways to already play these games, and the cabinet doesn't grab my attention from a looks perspective. That's important. It has to, although you could argue that the Legends Ultimate isn't necessarily pretty, but it makes up for that, I think, in what it can do, where this doesn't really do anything today, right? I mean, it plays some games, but there's not a lot to it right now. They couldn't even demo, I'm not trying to rip them apart, but they couldn't even demo their download games capability. So right now, for all intents and purposes, what we demoed was a system that can run 4 or 5 games. That's what we demoed.
Right.
So
and it just doesn't make any sense because basically you have a cabinet. Let's say you go to work and you're talking to your buddy at work and you're like, "Hey man, so I bought this arcade cabinet." Or no, I saw this arcade cabinet. Hear me out. It has a game you've never played before. That's been ported from mobile. Now get this, if you're playing on mobile, you can touch the screen. So what they did was they wrote some code that basically touches the screen for you when you're using the joystick, and it kind of knows where your character is. So if you're like press left, it's like touching left, and like, hear me out. It's going to be great. We're going to sell millions of them. Versus actually what they had was, hey, we made a Double Dragon cabinet that's got the license that looks like Double Dragon, and they're going to sell them at Walmart, and we have the license and Arcade 1-Up doesn't.
Yeah.
Which one's going to sell more,
I
right?
hear you, dude. I'm there with you. I'm here.
They're doing some weird mixture thing where you're like, anyway.
So I think we should talk a little bit about really, really quick, and then I want to open it up. I want to talk to everyone else. So what do you... I don't want to talk to you anymore. No, just kidding. I'm joking. So, no, but seriously, I think, you look at where we've come. They've come a long way. All these companies are, pressing each other to do better. And you look at, like, for instance, and I'm not making this all about Arcade 1-Up, but Arcade 1-Up sees Toy Shock. They release their pinball. They add all the things that Toy Shock didn't add. Let's add a dynamic screen to the back, which is a LCD version of a DMD. Let's put haptic feedback. Let's put accelerometers so I can actually nudge the machine. They are looking at these companies, I'm sure. They probably knew that product was even coming out. And they're like, look, we'll be late to the game, but we're going to do it better. Now, that's not to say that Toy Shock's going to sit there and lay down, but at the same time, Toy Shock has to prove themselves too. They have an extremely low user base. There's no way they have 2,000 people playing those cabinets yet. I would guess it's probably somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 kind of range as far as their user base. But then, we fast forward to, Arcade 1-Up is, I kind of thought that maybe they would lose some momentum. But then I start to see, Justin and I just get back from CS, and they're hitting everything. They're going, hey, we got these giant joysticks / sex toys. We've got the Coleco, we got the micro arcades. Those are really cool. You've got the retooled countercade. You've got the retooled the partycade or wallcade, whatever the heck they were calling it before. So I mean, they're really trying to hit everything. They got these handheld or not handhelds, but these dongles you hook up to your TV with a controller that is basically similar to an At Games Blast. I mean, they're literally going after it. So it is interesting because I think they're trying to say, look, we're just going to do everything. We're going to be the retro gaming like go-to. So it's interesting to see if they start bleeding into the territory of some of these other ones. Like Hyperkin makes a lot of cool retro products. Retrobit does. You got My Arcade. My Arcade was really all about micro arcades. So now all of a sudden, like those two companies could be kind of colliding, because if Arcade 1-Up has success there, do they start actually producing products that are the same as My Arcade? Like they could. But I guess the good thing in all of this is that none of this really existed. As far as all of this home arcade and this big, massive focus on retro in more of this cabinet format until over the past 2 years. So it's good for us consumers. The thing is, and Justin and I have talked about this, is where does it end? Like when are too many cabinets? Do you oversaturate at some point where you just have so many cabinets and your core fan base is like, dude, I don't have any room left? Because then you look over at Games, you're like, well, shit, I can do all that stuff right here. So it does kind of, we'll see where it goes. But I think if anything, all these options are good for us. We just have to educate ourselves. Like II Arcade right now, let's put that in the corner, right? They need to prove themselves. I don't even think we should really consider them a competitor right now. They're just someone that's trying to sort of bring something to market, and they have a lot to prove. So we'll put them in the corner for now. Don't you think, Justin?
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Like we're probably just about to get into the generation of home arcade cabinets where if you're the type of consumer that wants to build an arcade room, that's different, right? If some people, there's probably a lot of people that have the At Games Legend Ultimate, but they also own Arcade 1-Up cabinets.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, they have both.
Have a mixture of it. Or you maybe only have Arcade 1-Up cabinets. Yeah. If you run out of room and then you want to buy the latest version, what are you going to do with your old ones?
Yeah,
you might end up selling them. And so now you're going to have kind of like this aftermarket. So because right now we have basically you can go to Walmart and you can pick up their latest, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Marvel cabinet, and sometimes they have discounts. But the first generation, a lot of them have been marked way down because they're making room for the new ones.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have these, but now some people might start reselling their old ones because they want to get the new one. Maybe they bought Centipede or something like that, and they're like, I'd rather have, or maybe they got the Street Fighter and they want the new Street Fighter.
Yep.
That they promised to eventually release.
So Justin, I think we should. I mean, you're usually my poll guy. That sounds weird. Never mind. That sounds funny. Someone's going to take that and run with that. But you usually come up with all these great polls. Like, do you have any polls? Like, I want to start interacting with people because I think we said a lot, but I want to hear what people are thinking. What can you come up with from a poll perspective?
How about this? First, Zohar, thank you so much for the super chat. You gave us 2 super chats about MK being re-released. First of all, if you've been following us, you know that everything I've been talking about is Mortal Kombat because of you. And even last on Friday, we were on the Tech Buzz, and both Ralph and I were on the Tech Buzz. It's another podcast show, and we asked John D specifically about Mortal Kombat again. Now, as you know, we talked about Mortal Kombat with John D on RetroRalph's channel when we had the interview, when all of his friends were there. And he said it was a possibility, and we've kind of pushed him again. And he said this thing like, "Yes, we're going to do Street Fighter with stereo speakers."
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true.
I'm trying to figure out where your poll question is here.
All right, poll in the chat. Hit 1 if you've been to my website before. Hit 0 if you think Ralph is a loser.
Please don't hit 0.